Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, we travel back in time, not to the world as we know it, but to a realm of eternal night, of whispering winds and endless skies, where the very foundations of the cosmos were still forming. In this gentle retelling of ancient Greek myths, you'll be carried through tales as old as memory, told in a soft, calming voice to help you rest, relax, and perhaps even dream alongside the gods themselves. Our journey begins, as it must, with chaos. From this formless void came Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. Together, they bore the mighty Titans and set in motion the divine lineage that would shape all existence. You'll hear how Uranus, fearing his own children, cast them deep into the belly of the earth, and how Gaia, aching under the weight of betrayal, conspired with her son Cronus to change the fate of the world forever. From this act of defiance came blood and births the rise of Aphrodite, born of sea foam, and the vengeance of the Furies, birthed from pain. This is the story of the gods before the gods we know, and it flows like a deep river beneath everything that followed. As we continue, you'll be brought into the age of Cronus, king of the cosmos, whose fear mirrored his father's. He swallowed his own children as cheer, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon one by one. But Rhea, unwilling to lose another child, saved her youngest, Zeus. Raised in secret, he grew strong, wise, and ready to reclaim his birthright. You'll hear how Zeus returned, freed his siblings, and led the great rebellion against the Titans. Titanomachy. For 10 years, gods clashed with Titans, and thunder lit the skies. In the end, the Olympians rose victorious, and a new era began, one ruled from the heights of Mount Olympus. Later in this journey, we'll explore a tale of love and loss, one that still echoes with longing. When Persephone, daughter of Demeter, is taken by Hades into the Underworld, the world above grieves with the mother. Her descent brings winter, her return brings spring. It is a story of balance, of light and shadow, and the cycles we all live by. Each story in this collection has been chosen to soothe and inspire, not only for their grandeur, but for their stillness, the quiet truths they carry about nature, desire, courage, and change. And if you enjoy these stories, the tales bring you peace, or stir a gentle curiosity, please consider liking the video, leaving a comment, or subscribing. It helps others discover these myths and supports more journeys just like this one. Now, take a deep breath. Let the names of old gods drift around you like mist on a quiet sea. Let the past unfold slowly in waves of starlight and story. Welcome to Greek Tales for Sleep, soft-spoken, dreamlike, timeless. Enjoy. Tale 1. The Birth of the Gods. In the beginning, there was only chaos, not chaos as we understand it today, not mere confusion or disarray, but chaos as the ancient Greeks envisioned it, a vast, silent void. It was not a place, nor a presence, but a condition of existence before form or thought. It was infinite and formless, stretching without boundary or time, a deep, breathless expanse in which nothing yet existed, damned, from which everything would come. Chaos was the raw fabric of reality, unmolded and undefined. There was no sky above, no land below, no sun, no moon, no stars, no breath of wind, nor crash of wave. there was only stillness, and within that stillness, the first stirrings of existence began like the tremble of a heartbeat. From this great emptiness, something shifted. The silence was broken by the first whisper of being. Slowly, deliberately, the primeval elements emerged, not as creations, but as awakenings, forces as old as time, yet just now becoming. They came not with noise or fire, but like a dream rising. From slumber, unseen but undeniable dot, from chaos emerged Gaia. The earth, she was the first form, the first shape, the first mother. Her body was vast, round, fertile, clothed in green forests and deep oceans, yet unborn. She was the foundation of all things, the enduring, nourishing land that would support gods and mortals alike. Her breath would one day become the wind, her bones the mountains, her veins the rivers. But in these earliest days, she waited patient and powerful. Aware of her destiny, dot with Gaia came Tartarus, a place not beneath her, but deeper still, a yawning chasm far below the lightless womb of creation. Tartarus was the antithesis of the earth, heavy, dark, and suffocating. It was the abyss, the prison, the end of all journeys. From the moment of its emergence, it would remain the deepest pit, feared even by the gods. Then came Nyx, the night mysterious and shadowed, robed in darkness that blanketed the void. Nyx moved silently through the void, bearing no light, but holding within her the seeds of sleep, dreams, and death. From her union with Erebus, the darkness between worlds, would later be born the first true boundaries between life and death, day and night. Yet amid these heavy, ancient presences, another force awakened, Eros, the spirit of love, longing, and creation. Not the charming god of later myth, but a primordial presence, powerful and profound. Eros was the unseen hand that pulled the universe together. He brought attraction to the formless, binding chaos into structure and giving the cosmos the first desire to grow, to multiply, to become. Under the influence of Eros, the void no longer remained still. It stirred, it pulsed, and it began to bloom. Gaia, alone but yearning, brought forth Uranus. The sky, he was a great canopy of shimmering stars, arching above her, vast and bright. He was not her son, as mortals would understand it, but her counterpart, other half of a perfect whole. She rose to meet him, and he descended to cover her. They embraced across the horizon, and from their union, the world began to take form. From Gaia and Uranus came the Titans, the first generation of God's beings of immense power and elemental purpose. Among them were Oceanus, the river that encircled the world, Hyperion, who would one day sire the sun, moon, and dawn, Iapetus, whose lineage would bear the burden of mortality, and Cronus, the youngest, shrewdest, and most dangerous of them all. With them came their sisters, Rhea, who would become the mother of gods, they radiant with light, Mnemosyne, the keeper of memory, Themis, embodiment of divine law and order. The Titans roamed the newborn earth, shaping mountains, rivers, and seas. Under their influence, the world awakened. Trees grew, winds danced, and stars moved in their sacred paths. But as life flourished, darkness returned not from without, but from within. Uranus, fearing his children, began to despise them. He saw their power not as glory, but as threat. From his high throne in the sky, he cast judgment on his own blood. One by one, he forced the Titans back into Gaia's depths, burying them alive within her vast body. The earth groaned beneath their weight, suffering as her own children tore at her from within. Gaia, wounded and enraged, sought retribution. She forged a great sickle of unbreakable flint and called upon her children to avenge her pain. None dared to defy Uranus, none but Cronus, sly and bold. One night, when Uranus came to embrace Gaia once more, Cronus struck. With one swift blow, he severed his father from the world. The sky's blood fell into the sea and upon the earth, giving rise to terrible and wondrous beings, the Erinyes, avengers of sin, the giants born to challenge the heavens. And from sea foam and blood, the luminous Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, rose from the waves like dawn breaking over the ocean. Cronus ascended as king, ruler of the cosmos. His age was called the Golden Age, a time of abundance, peace, and plenty. Mortals lived without toil or sorrow, yet the seeds of ruin had already taken root. Warned by Gaia and the whispering fates, Cronus heard a grim prophecy. One of his children would overthrow him, just as he had his own father. Terrified, Cronus sought to thwart fate. When Rhea bore him a child, he swallowed it whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, each consumed before their cries could echo. The cycle of fear and violence continued, but Rhea, desperate to save her last son, turned to Gaia. Together they hatched a plan. When Zeus was born, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and gave it to Cronus, who swallowed the deception whole. Zeus was hidden away on the sacred Isle of Crete, raised in a cave where the bees fed him honey and the goat Amalthea gave him milk. Warriors known as the Curetes danced and clashed their spears to drown out his cries. As Zeus grew, so did his wisdom. He learned the secrets of the earth and sky, of time and memory. He grew strong, shaped by both prophecy and purpose. One day, with the aid of the Titanomachy, he tricked Cronus into drinking a potion that forced him to vomit up his swallowed children. One by one, they emerged fully formed, divine and vengeful. The children of Cronus and Rhea united, and with them began the Titanomachy, the great war between gods and titans. For 10 years, the battle raged. The heavens burned with lightning, the earth quaked with fury, oceans boiled, volcanoes thundered. The very fabric of creation trembled. Zeus, guided by Gaia once more, descended into Tartarus and freed the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, long imprisoned by Uranus. In gratitude, the Cyclopes gave Zeus his thunderbolt, Poseidon his trident, and Hades his helm of invisibility. With these weapons, the tide of war turned. Cronus and the Titans were defeated. Those who opposed Olympus were hurled into Tartarus, bound in chains of divine fire. Atlas, for his defiance, was cursed to bear the weight of the heavens for eternity. The age of the Titans was over. Zeus claimed the sky as his realm, Poseidon the seas, and Hades the underworld. Olympus rose as the seat of divine power. From its heights, the Olympian gods watched over mortals, intervening, guiding, testing, and sometimes destroying them. From chaos had come cosmos, from silence had come song. The divine had descended from dream into memory, and from memory into story, yet this was only the beginning. The age of heroes would rise, the age of monsters, of trials, of prophecies fulfilled and denied, and through it all, the voices of Gaia and chaos lingered, whispering that even gods are shaped by what came before and by what lies waiting in the shadows beyond the stars. Tale 2: The 12 Labors of Hercules long ago. In the age when gods and heroes walked the earth, there lived a man unlike any other. His name was Heracles, a son of Zeus, born with great strength and courage, yet burdened with a fate heavy upon his shoulders. His life was marked by trials, triumphs, and a relentless quest for redemption. Heracles' story begins in a kingdom ruled by King Eurystheus, a man chosen by the gods to impose a series of nearly impossible tasks upon the mighty hero. These tasks, known as the 12 Labors, were decreed to cleanse Heracles of a dark curse and to prove his worth as a true hero. The first labor was to slay the Nemean lion, a beast of terrible strength whose hide was impervious to weapons. Heracles journeyed to the land of Nemea, where the lion terrorized the people, its roar shaking the hills and its claws tearing through the forests. Finding the beast in its cave, Heracles faced it with only his immense strength. When his arrows and sword proved useless against the lion's golden fur, he wrestled the creature with his bare hands. After a fierce struggle, he choked the lion until it fell lifeless. Then, using the lion's own claws, he skinned it and wore its hide as a cloak, a symbol of his victory and protection. Next came the Lernaean Hydra, a monstrous serpent with many heads. Each time Heracles cut one head off, 2 more would grow in its place. The creature dwelled in the swampy marshes of Lerna, poisoning the land with its breath. Heracles called upon his nephew Iolaus to aid him. As Heracles severed each head, Iolaus cauterized the stump with a burning torch, preventing new heads from sprouting. Finally, Heracles crushed the single immortal head beneath a massive rock, ending the Hydra's terror forever. The third labor was to capture the Cyrenian hind, a sacred deer with golden antlers and hooves of bronze. It was a swift and elusive creature sacred to the goddess Artemis. For a year, Heracles pursued the hind across forests and mountains, always careful not to harm it. Finally, he trapped the creature gently and brought it before Eurystheus, who was astonished at the hero's patience and respect for the sacred. For the 4th labor, Heracles was tasked with capturing the Erymanthian boar, a fierce beast that roamed the snowy hills. Heracles chased the boar into deep snow, where it became trapped. He seized it and carried the wild creature alive to Eurystheus, who was so frightened by the boar's ferocity that he hid in a large jar. The 5th labor took Heracles to clean the Augean stables in a single day. These stables belonged to King Augeas and had not been cleaned for decades, housing thousands of cattle. Using his ingenuity and strength, Heracles diverted the courses of 2 rivers, Alpheus and Peneus, to wash out the stables in a mighty flood. Completing the impossible task swiftly and cleverly, the 6th labor required Heracles to drive away the Stymphalian birds, man-eating creatures with metallic feathers and piercing cries. With the help of Athena's bronze castanets, Heracles startled the birds into flight and then shot many down with his arrows, freeing the region from their menace. After completing his first 6 labors, Heracles had proven himself a hero of unmatched strength and courage, yet the tasks decreed by King Eurystheus still awaited him. These final 6 labors would test not only his might, but his heart and mind. The 7th labor was to capture the Cretan bull, a magnificent beast sent from the sea by the god Poseidon. The bull was wild and fierce, wreaking havoc across Crete. With its thunderous charge, Heracles sailed to the island and wrestled the great creature to the ground, binding it with ropes. He then carried the bull across the sea to Eurystheus, who, terrified, released it to roam elsewhere. Next, the 8th labor required Heracles to steal the mares of Diomedes, man-eating horses belonging to a Thracian king. These horses were wild and savage, fed on human flesh. Heracles overpowered the king's men and tamed the horses by feeding them Diomedes himself, calming their savage nature. He then brought the mares safely to Eurystheus. The 9th labor was to obtain the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the fierce Amazons. Hippolyta, impressed by Heracles' strength and honor, willingly gave him the girdle. However, Hera's meddling stirred suspicion among the Amazons, and a battle erupted. Heracles fought bravely, securing the girdle and returning with it to Eurystheus. For the 10th labor, Heracles was sent to fetch the cattle of the giant Geryon, who lived on a distant island. Geryon was a fearsome figure with 3 bodies, guarding his vast herd. After a long and perilous journey, Heracles slew the giant and herded the cattle back across treacherous lands and seas to Eurystheus. The 11th labor was perhaps the most delicate, to steal the golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides. These apples were a gift from Gaia to Hera and guarded by the nymphs called the Hesperides, as well as a fearsome dragon named Ladon. Heracles first sought the guidance of the Titan Atlas, who held the heavens on his shoulders. Heracles offered to hold the sky while Atlas fetched the apples. Upon return, Atlas tried to leave Heracles holding the sky forever, but Heracles cleverly tricked him into taking the burden back and escaped with the golden apples. Finally, the 12th labor was the most daunting: to capture Cerberus, the 3-headed hound that guarded the gates of the Underworld. Heracles descended into Hades with permission from the god of the dead, Hades himself. Facing terrifying spirits and the dark silence of the realm, Heracles wrestled Cerberus without weapons, subduing the beast with his bare hands. He brought Cerberus to Eurystheus and then returned the creature to the Underworld, completing his final labor. But with the completion of these 12 labors, Heracles freed himself from the curse that had plagued him and earned eternal fame. He had battled monsters, faced gods, and triumphed over impossible odds. His story would echo through time, inspiring courage and perseverance in all who heard it. Tale 3: The Flight of Icarus in the shadowed heart of the Cretan labyrinth, where the walls whispered secrets older than the stars. A boy dreamed of the sky. Icarus was not like the other children of the island. While they played in the sun-warmed streets of Knossos, chasing goats or trading shells beside the sea, Icarus walked the parapets of the palace, staring at the open blue above. He would lie for hours, arms spread like wings, eyes tracking the gulls that cried freedom with every beat of their wings. He dreamed of being one of them, not to fly away, but to understand what it meant to be above the world. His father, Daedalus, watched him from the shadows of stone corridors. The famed inventor had once built wonders for kings and queens, but now he was a prisoner of his own brilliance, for it was Daedalus who had crafted the labyrinth. The the sprawling maze beneath the palace at the behest of King Minos, a prison designed not for men, but for the monstrous Derion, the Minotaur, half man, half bull, born of the queen's curse and the god's cruelty. And because Daedalus knew its secrets, Minos would never let him go. So Daedalus toiled in silence, his genius bound by stone, yet in Icarus he saw a spark not just of curiosity, but of something purer. Hope, wild, untamed, beautiful hope, the kind that reaches even when it knows it might fall. They lived like shadows in the palace, kept by guards, fed by silent servants. Daedalus was allowed his tools, his materials, under the king's watchful eye. He invented toys for the royal children, defenses for the palace, traps and marvels. But all the while he plotted for freedom, for flight. One night, while the sea sang lullabies to the moon and the stars blinked in ancient rhythm, Daedalus brought Icarus to his hidden workshop beneath the palace. There, under torchlight, hung wings massive, feathered, delicate yet strong. The frame was wood, the feathers stitched together with wax and resin, a marvel of art and science. Are they real? Icarus whispered, stepping forward with reverence. They will be, Daedalus said. They must be. He had studied birds for years, how they rode the thermals, how they adjusted their feathers to glide or dive. He had built prototypes, failed many times, but now the design was ready. The wings were not just machines, they were dreams forged into form. For us, Icarus asked. Daedalus nodded. We leave tomorrow with the tide. The guards change. At dawn, we fly east toward the islands. There's a place where Minos's reach does not extend. That night, Icarus did not sleep. He lay awake, staring at the rafters, his heart a storm. Fear, yes, but wonder too. He would fly, not in dreams, but in truth. Dawn broke like spilled fire across the sea. The sky blushed gold and crimson as father and son strapped the wings to their arms. Daedalus's hands were steady, but Icarus saw the tremble in his breath. The palace tower, the highest point in Knossos, would be their launch. Icarus, Daedalus said, his voice low. Listen to me. The boy turned, excitement burning in his eyes. These wings will carry you, but they are fragile. Fly too low, and the sea spray will weigh them down. Fly too high, and the sun will melt the wax. You must keep to the middle path. I understand, Icarus said, though his gaze had already drifted skyward. Promise me. I promise. They leapt. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the wind caught them, and the world fell away. The air was alive, a roaring river of invisible force. Icarus gasped, the wind stealing his breath, his heart slamming like a drum. He flapped hard, mimicking the gulls he had watched for so long, and the wings responded, lifting, gliding, dancing. They soared below the sea, shimmered like a coin. Islands dotted the blue like scattered gems. Fishermen pointed from their boats, mouths agape. A shepherd fell to his knees as two winged figures passed above, radiant against the morning sun. Daedalus flew with the control of experience, adjusting his feathers, banking gently. He glanced back often, calling to his son, but Icarus was laughing wild, bright, full-throated joy. He dove, spinning, then rose again, each movement more daring than the last. Icarus, Daedalus cried, "Stay close. but the boy didn't. Herod didn't want to. He climbed higher. The sun greeted him, warm and golden. The wind sang sweeter up here. The earth was a dream, the sea a memory. Icarus spread his arms wide and screamed his joy to the heavens. He was a god. But the sun, kind to flowers and cruel to wax, burned hot. At first, he didn't notice. A feather drifting. Then another. The wings felt heavier. The seams loosened. The wax began to weep. Then came the drop. It wasn't a fall, it was a betrayal. The sky let go. The wind turned against him. The wings, his beautiful wings, fell apart in his hands. Father, he screamed. Daedalus heard Eta cry, split the heavens. He turned in time to see his son tumble, flailing, a figure of light and ruin. Icarus, the boy, fell like a star, bright and fast. He hit the sea with a sound like breaking. Daedalus dove, wings trembling with grief. He searched, eyes red, voice hoarse. The sea answered only with waves. At last, he found the feathers floating like prayers. He found the body, too cradled. In the arms of the tide, he held his son, weeping into the salt. The wings drifting around them like broken halos. On a lonely shore, Daedalus built a cairn, a mound of stones, a monument to youth, to hope, to the fire that burns too bright. The island was named Icaria, and the sea that swallowed him. The Icarian Sea, even the gods remembered, for in every child who dreams of flight, in every heart that rises at the sight of open sky, Icarus lives on, not as a caution, but as a song, a story of how even a moment of true freedom is worth the fall. And somewhere, in the quiet between wind and wave, a boy with wings still laughs, chasing the sun. Tale 4. Persephone and the Underworld long ago. In an age when the world was young and the gods still walked among us, the earth wore a gentle stillness. It was a hush of ancient magic, a pause in time when the skies hung heavy with quiet clouds, and the sun cast silver light across sleeping fields. Spring had not yet found her voice, and summer had not yet warmed the bones of the land. The world waited as though holding its breath, suspended between dream and awakening. In this tender silence walked Demeter, goddess of the grain, the harvest, and all things that grow. She was a presence of warmth and nurture, her touch soft. As Pneumos, her breath the wind that stirred the wheat. Where she stepped, green life unfurled. Her laughter coaxed blossoms from bare branches, and her sorrow could bend the sky to grey. Yet, above all, her heart belonged to one being alone, her daughter Persephone. Persephone, the maiden of spring, danced through meadows like sunlight through morning mist. She was young and wild and radiant, her laughter ringing like silver. Bells, she gathered flowers with nimble fingers, narcissus, hyacinth. Wild daffodils on her feet barely touched the earth as she moved. Butterflies followed her like prayers. Bees hummed lullabies in her presence. The land, even in its half-sleep, leaned toward her with longing. She was life at its beginning, untamed, full of wonder, unknowing of sorrow, but far below, in the silent depths of the world, another watched. Hades, lord of the underworld, dwelled in a realm where no sun rose, where silence fell like snow, and time drifted slowly through endless shadow. He was not a god of malice, but of solitude bound by duty. Shaped by silence, ancient and still as the grave. Yet when he beheld Persephone, something stirred. Her light pierced his darkness. Her laughter echoed in the empty halls of his kingdom, awakening something long buried in his heart. The earth shifted one day, while Persephone wandered far from Olympus, drawn by a strange and haunting bloomer, single, otherworldly flower, unlike any she had seen. She reached to pluck it. As her fingers touched the petal, the ground beneath her trembled, not with fury but with longing. A rift opened, not violent but slow and deep, as though the world were opening a secret it had hidden for centuries. From this fissure rose Hades, regal and grave, wreathed in night but not in cruelty. His chariot, black as obsidian, shimmered. In the gloom he said nothing. With solemn grace he reached for Persephone. Startled, her cry barely had time to rise before she was swept into his arms and carried downward. The earth folding closed above her like a sigh. The meadow grew still. The flowers dropped their heads. The sun slipped behind a veil. When Demeter realized her daughter had vanished, her grief was boundless. She tore through the heavens and roamed across the mortal world in disguise, seeking her child. Her cries echoed through valleys, her tears fed barren soil. She cast aside her divine form, walking among mortals with dust in her hair, hollowed by sorrow. Crops shriveled, trees bore no fruit, even the rivers flowed more slowly, burdened by the heaviness of her loss. For days turned to months and months to seasons. The world was locked in mourning. No warmth came, no seed took root. In the underworld, Persephone wandered marble halls lined with ghostlight. Hades treated her not with cruelty, but with an unfamiliar tenderness, offering her a throne, music, and jewels that shimmered like frozen stars. Yet she longed not for splendor, but for sky, for birdsong, for her mother's arms, for the wind that tasted of the sea. Though he never forced her to love him, Hades offered her choice. Still, Persephone felt the world pulling at her heart, her roots tangled in two realms. In a moment of loneliness, she found herself before a bowl of fruit-deep, red pomegranate seeds, glistening like the blood of memory. Hunger, weariness, curiosity all drew her hand. She tasted 6, each one sealing her fate. When Zeus at last intervened, Demeter's sorrow had begun to break the world. Confronted by her fury, the king of the gods relented. He sent Hermes, swift-footed and silver-tongued, to the underworld. With a decree, Persephone must be returned, but Hades could not deny the law of the old ways. Because she had eaten the fruit of the underworld, she belonged to it, at least in part. A compromise was reached. For 6 months of the year, Persephone would return to the world above, to her mother's waiting arms. For 6 months she would rule as queen of the underworld, sovereign of the dead and the dark, equal to her husband. No longer just a maiden, but a goddess of balance. And thus the seasons were born. When Persephone rises, the earth awakens. The snow melts, buds bloom. The breeze carries the music of rebirth. Demeter rejoices, and the land sings. These are the days of spring and summer long, golden, filled with fruit and song. But when Persephone descends once more into shadow, the world grows quiet. Demeter's heart grows still. Autumn's melancholy drapes the trees, and winter's hush follows close behind. The earth sleeps, waiting for the return of its daughter. This tale, whispered in the rustle of leaves and echoed in the hush before snowfall, is more than myth. It is the rhythm of life itself, an endless dance of joy and loss, of reunion and parting, of growth and rest. It is the song of mothers and daughters, of change and constancy, of the sacred balance between light and shadow. In Persephone's journey lies the heartbeat of the world. Tale 3, the Titanomachy, the War of the Gods, long before the reign of mortal kings, before cities crowned mountaintops and temples kissed the sky, before even the stars charted their silver paths or the winds knew the name of the seasons. There existed only chaos and vast, untamed power. From this formless void emerged Gaia, the boundless earth, ancient and knowing, and Uranus, the infinite sky, majestic and aloof. In their union was born the Cosmosar wild, roaring infancy of creation, and from it came the Titans. These were not gods as we know them now, but primordial powers, beings of immense stature, raw intent, and elemental dominion. They were born not from time but before it, sculpted from the flesh of the earth and the breath of the stars. Mountains moved at their will, oceans rose to their knees. Each Titan held sway over some aspect of existence, and none dared challenge their supremacy. At the center of this ancient pantheon stood Cronus, the youngest yet most ambitious of the 12 original Titans. With blade forged from Gaia's own essence, Cronus betrayed his father Uranus, whose rule had become tyrannical and suffocating. He struck him down at Gaia's urging, separating sky from earth forever and seizing control of the cosmos. Thus began the golden age of the Titans, a time of order, yet built on betrayal and shadowed by prophecy. But the fates, those 3 whispering weavers of destiny, had already spun a thread darker than Cronus could see. From the blood of Uranus spilled upon the earth, new beings had emerged, vengers, monsters, and mysteries. And from his dying breath came a curse. As Cronus had overthrown his father, so too would he be cast down by his own child. That dark echo settled deep into Cronus's mind. Ruling beside him was Rhea, Titaness of motherhood and fertility, whose love was as boundless as the sky her husband had severed. She bore him child after child, bright, divine, golden with promise. But Cronus, fearing the prophecy, devoured each one at birth. One by one, they vanished into the cavern of his belly. Hestia, goddess of the hearth, Demeter of grain and growth, Hera, destined queen of the gods, Hades, the silent one, and Poseidon, bearer of ocean's fury. Rhea wept in secret, her arms forever empty, her heart cracking with every swallowed cry. The world above began to suffer to seeds that never sprouted, rivers that ran bitter, skies that no longer rejoiced. Creation itself recoiled from Cronus's fear, but Gaia watched. The Earth Mother, older than fate and more enduring than the stars, whispered once again to her daughter Rhea, guiding her to make a final stand. When Rhea bore her 6th child, a son destined to fulfill the prophecy, she wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and gave it to Cronus. The Titan swallowed the decoy without suspicion. Meanwhile, the child's use was spirited away to the hidden reaches of Crete. Cradled in a cave beneath the whispering oaks of Mount Ida, there, in shadows and secrecy, Zeus grew not into a boy, but into a storm. he was nursed by Amalthea, a divine goat whose milk filled him with strength. His cries were drowned by the curate's warriors who clashed their spears and shields in rhythmic chaos. He was fed on the stories of the stars, on whispers of his imprisoned siblings, and on dreams of freedom. The cave echoed with prophecy and thunder alike as Zeus grew into manhood, his soul tempered by the silence of destiny. The cosmos outside shivered with anticipation when the time was ripe. Zeus descended from hiding and entered his father's court in disguise. He approached Cronus not as a warrior but as a servant, bearing a potion mixed by Metis, the goddess of wisdom. It was a draught brewed with fire and memory, crafted to unbind what had been swallowed. Cronus drank. His stomach heaved and churned, and with a terrible cry, he vomited forth the gods he had imprisoned: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Fully grown and brimming with fury, they emerged like the breaking of a dam. They stood beside Zeus, no longer children, but Olympians, new gods, forged in suffering, ready to challenge the old. And thus began the Titanomachy, the war of the gods. 10 years the battle raged, shaking the bones of the world. Mount Olympus, seat of the Titans, clashed with Mount Olympus, rising strong and radiant with its new gods. The sky became a canvas of war torn by lightning, painted with fire. The ground split and reformed. The seas boiled with Poseidon's wrath. The underworld echoed with Hades' summoning of spirits and shadows. Hera fought with strategy, Demeter brought famine upon Titan's strongholds, and Hestia kept the hearth of Olympus alight through the darkest nights. The Titans, ancient and colossal, fought with the weight of time and tradition. Hyperion burned with sunfire. Oceanus rose like a tsunami. Coups wielded the chill of the void, and at their heart stood Cronus, unyielding, defiant and desperate to preserve his reign. Yet the Olympians, young though they were, had allies the Titans had long forgotten. Zeus journeyed into Tartarus, the pit where Uranus had banished the monstrous Hecatoncheus giants with 100 arms, and the one-eyed Cyclopes with divine might. Zeus shattered their bonds and lifted them from their prison. Grateful, the Cyclopes forged the weapons that would shape all history. Thunderbolts for Zeus, a trident for Poseidon, and a helm of invisibility for Hades. Empowered, the Olympians launched their final assault. Zeus's thunder split the sky like the voice of creation itself. Poseidon shattered islands and drowned legions. Hades struck from the unseen realm, turning Titan soldiers into fleeting whispers. One by one, the elder gods fell. The Titans, once the undisputed masters of existence, were driven back to the edge of reality. In a final, furious clash, Cronus and Zeus met in battle. Sky split from sky. Their weapons struck with the sound of time cracking, but Cronus, burdened by the centuries and weakened by fear, could not withstand the force of the new age. He fell not slain, but broken. The Titans were defeated. One by one, they were bound in chains of divine fire and hurled into Tartarus, deeper than any mortal dream could reach. There they would remain, guarded by the Hecatoncheus, buried in silence, all but one Nutlus, the mighty who had led the Titans in battle. As punishment, he was sentenced to hold the sky aloft for all eternity, a pillar between heaven and earth, doomed to bear the weight of his ancestors' pride, and from this ash of war, a new world emerged. Zeus, now king, divided the realms among his brothers, the heavens to himself, the sea to Poseidon, and the underworld to Hades. Upon Olympus they built a palace of light and cloud, where the new gods would watch over the mortal world and shape its destiny. It was the dawn of a new age, an age of gods, with mortal hearts, of heroes and monsters, of choices and consequences. The world had been reborn not in peace, but in the fire of transformation. The Titanomachy, though over, left echoes in the earth, reminders that no power, however ancient, is eternal. Even the stars, newly hung in the sky, carried memories of the war. They burned as watchful witnesses, shining down upon a world now ruled by gods of thunder, sea, and shadow gods, born not from peace, but from rebellion. The world had changed, and in that change the stories began. Tale 5, Prometheus and the Gift of Fire. Long ago, before the days of kings and heroes, before the cities rose and men learned to tame the earth, there was Prometheus, a titan unlike any other. He was clever, thoughtful, and filled with a deep love for mankind, a new creation just beginning to walk the earth. Prometheus watched as humans lived in darkness, shivering cold beneath the stars, their hands empty, unable to shape their world. They were fragile, vulnerable, and lost. Though the gods held power, the humans knew little of fire, the warm, bright force that could light their nights, cook their food, and forge their tools. It was said that fire was a secret treasure of the gods, locked away on Mount Olympus, glowing with a fierce, sacred light. No mortal was allowed to possess it, for fire was divine, a symbol of power and creation. Yet Prometheus, moved by compassion and daring, decided that humans deserved this gift, the very spark that would awaken their potential. He journeyed quietly to Olympus, under the cloak of night. The halls of the gods shimmered in moonlight, their laughter echoing through the air like music. But Prometheus was not deterred. With steady hands and a quick mind, he stole a burning ember from the heart of the god's sacred flame, hiding it safely in a hollow stalk of fennel dot. Returning to earth, Prometheus carried the stolen fire to the humans. At once, the dark nights were chased away by the warm glow of flames. People gathered around the fire, feeling its heat against their skin, learning to cook their meals and forge tools that shaped their world. The gift of fire was a turning point, a spark that ignited the dawn of civilization. But the gods watched this act with fury. Zeus, king of Olympus, was enraged that a mere titan would defy the divine order. The gift of fire to humans threatened the gods' power and the natural balance they had maintained. Prometheus' bold defiance could not go unpunished. In a great storm of wrath, Zeus summoned Prometheus to Mount Caucasus. There, in a lonely and craggy place, the Titan was chained to a rock. Each day, a terrible eagle, a symbol of Zeus himself, swooped down and tore at Prometheus' liver, a torment without end. Yet every night his liver would heal, and the suffering would begin anew. Despite the agony, Prometheus endured, his spirit unbroken. His punishment was a warning, but also a testament to the price of rebellion and the gift of knowledge. He had brought light to mankind, but at a great personal cost. As the days turned into months, and the months into years, Prometheus remained bound to the rocky cliff of Mount Caucasus. The cold winds whipped round him, the sun beat down relentlessly, and the shadows of the towering peaks stretched long across his chained form. The eagle's cruel visits came without mercy, each strike tearing into his flesh. Yet his will remained steadfast and unyielding. Far below, mankind flourished in the light of the stolen fire. The flames that Prometheus gifted them had transformed their existence. No longer were humans helpless creatures of night and cold. Around their fires, they gathered to share stories, to craft tools that could bend nature to their will, to cook meals that nourished body and spirit alike. Fire had become the hearth of civilization, the beating heart of progress. But even as mankind prospered, the gods' displeasure simmered. Zeus' rage was not limited to the punishment of Prometheus alone. He sought to remind humanity of its place beneath the gods, to ensure that the gift of fire did not lead them to forget their humble origins. And so Zeus devised a new and terrible plan. He commanded Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, to create a being unlike any other, a woman, fashioned from earth and water, beautiful and enchanting, yet carrying within her a curse. This was Pandora, the first mortal woman, a gift wrapped in deception. To her, the gods gave many gifts: grace, cunning, curiosity, but Zeus gave her a Jaraphon, mistranslated as a box filled with all the evils of the world. Pandora was sent down to earth, and there she found Prometheus' brother, Epimetheus. Despite warnings from Prometheus not to accept gifts from the gods, Epimetheus took Pandora as his wife, and curiosity, that most human of traits, compelled Pandora to open the jar. From it poured sickness, sorrow, envy, and painables that had never touched the world before. Only hope remained inside, trapped at the bottom, a small consolation amid the unleashed suffering. Thus, Zeus ensured mankind would never be free from struggle, even as they had been given the power of fire. The gods maintained their grip on the balance between power and humility, knowledge and obedience. Meanwhile, Prometheus endured his torment with silent dignity. His thoughts were with the humans he had come to love, with the gift he had given so freely. Legends tell that Prometheus' suffering would only end when a mortal hero would come to free him, a hero who would challenge the will of the gods themselves. That hero was Hercules, the son of Zeus, born of both god and mortal blood. Driven by great strength and compassion, Hercules would one day climb the treacherous heights of Mount Caucasus. There, with a mighty stroke of his bow or sword, he would shatter the chains that bound Prometheus, releasing him from his endless torment. Yet, even after his freedom, Prometheus' story would not end. He would continue to walk among mortals and gods, a symbol of sacrifice, rebellion, and the unyielding quest for knowledge. His legacy, carried in the fire's warm glow, would live on in the hearts of humankind. After his daring rescue by Hercules, Prometheus was free from his chains, yet his trials were far from over. Though his body no longer bore the torment of the eagle's beak, his spirit carried the weight of centuries of sacrifice for humanity. The bond between Prometheus and mankind had deepened beyond mere defiance. It had become a sacred trust, a promise that knowledge and progress would always be worth the price. Prometheus, now freed, sought to guide humanity in their newfound strength. He taught them the arts of civilization, how to cultivate the soil, craft weapons and tools, and harness the mysteries of the stars. He became a guardian of wisdom, a silent mentor whose presence was felt in every flicker of flame, every forge's spark, every whisper of innovation. Yet the gods watched with wary eyes. Zeus, though he had allowed Heracles to free Prometheus, remained cautious. He understood that the flame Prometheus had gifted to mankind was more than a simple tool. It was a symbol of power, knowledge, and potential rebellion. The line between order and chaos, between God and mortal, was fragile. In response, Zeus tightened his grip on Olympus. He sent forth other warnings and punishments to humankind, reminding them that the gods' favor was not to be taken lightly. The balance between mortal ambition and divine authority was delicate and easily shattered. Prometheus, however, continued his work. He inspired poets, artists, and thinkers. He urged mortals to look beyond the heavens and seek understanding in the world around them. He showed them that fire was not just heat and light, but a spark of creativity, a tool for transformation. His tale, passed down through generations, became a beacon for those who dared to dream and challenge the limits set before them. From his story came the seeds of human ingenuity, courage, and resilience. And so, the gift of fire remained a gift born from defiance, sustained by suffering and carried forward by hope. As the centuries unfolded, the legacy of Prometheus grew. Ever more profound, his gift transformed humanity, igniting the fires of civilization. With fire came warmth on cold nights, the ability to cook food, forging metal tools and weapons that shaped societies, and even the light to banish darkness and fear. But fire was more than mere utility, was a symbol of enlightenment, of the spark within the human soul that reached beyond survival toward creativity and understanding. Yet Prometheus' sacrifice was never forgotten by the gods or mortals. His enduring pain, his eternal punishment, stood as a stark reminder of the cost of challenging divine will. In tales whispered by ancient firesides, he was revered as both hero and martyr, a figure who bridged the chasm between gods and men. Despite Zeus's warnings and attempts to control humanity's newfound power, the fire spread. It kindled revolutions in thought and action. Cities rose from the wilderness, arts flourished, and knowledge blossomed. Prometheus became a symbol of the eternal struggle for freedom, knowledge, and progressor, champion of the human spirits. Boundless capacity dot in the hearts of many, the story of Prometheus was a quiet reassurance that even in the face of overwhelming authority, courage and wisdom could light the way forward. His tale was retold across generations through poets, playwrights, and philosophers, inspiring countless souls to seek their own flames. Though the eagle's torment was finally ended by Heracles, the echo of Prometheus's defiance still resonated. It reminded gods and mortals alike that true power lies not in dominance or fear, but in the courage to create, to endure, and to hope. Don't so. The gift of fire remains forever entwined with the story of Prometheus's story of sacrifice, rebellion, and the everlasting flame of human ingenuity. Tale 6. The Judgment of Paris and the Trojan War, prelude long ago, before the great clash of heroes and the thunder of war echoed through the plains of Troy. There was a moment, quiet yet profound, that set the wheels of destiny turning. This was the tale of the judgment of Paris's story of choices that intertwined beauty, desire, pride, and fate, shaping the very course of history and myth. It began with a wedding feast unlike any other, held high on Mount Olympus. Peleus, a mortal king known for his valor and wisdom, was joined in holy matrimony with Thetis, a sea goddess whose grace was like the gentle ebb and flow of the ocean's tides. The gods gathered to celebrate this union, filling the sky with laughter, music, and light that shimmered brighter than the stars themselves. It was a day of joy, of blessings, of harmony among the divine and mortal worlds. But amid the chorus of revelry, a shadow lurked. Eris, the goddess of discord, was left uninvited, her bitterness kindled by exclusion. She moved through the feast like a whisper of cold wind, carrying in her hand a golden apple polished to a radiant gleam. With a mischievous smile, she cast the apple into the midst of the gathered gods, and upon its smooth surface were inscribed the words, "To the fairest." The apple rolled silently across the marble floor, catching the glint of candlelight, and drawing the gaze of all present. The goddesses Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each stepped forward, claiming the prize. Hera, queen of Olympus, an embodiment of regal power, her eyes sharp and commanding, believed her status alone crowned her as the fairest. Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and valor, radiant with intellect and strength, declared that her virtues outshone mere beauty. Aphrodite, the very embodiment of love and desire, smiled with enchanting confidence, knowing her allure was unmatched. Their voices rose, a chorus of challenge and pride, as they each proclaimed their right to the apple. The other gods watched, amused and concerned, as tension thickened in the air. Even Zeus, the mighty king of the gods, was uncertain whom to favor in this quarrel. To avoid offending any, he decreed that a mortal would decide the matter won. Known for fairness and insight, Paris, Prince of Troy, was chosen. He was a young man of striking beauty, with an air of calm and thoughtful grace. His reputation for justice had reached Olympus, making him a fitting judge for a dispute so delicate and dangerous. But little did he know that this choice would thrust him into the center of a cosmic drama. Before Paris stood the three goddesses, each ready to sway him with gifts and promises that sparkled like jewels. Hera, with regal dignity, promised him dominion over all Asia and lands beyond, the power of kings at his fingertips. Athena, with wisdom gleaming in her eyes, offered unmatched skill in battle and the glory of victory, the strength of heroes. In his arms, Aphrodite, with a voice as soft as the evening breeze and a smile full of promise, offered him the love of the most beautiful mortal woman in the world, Helen, queen of Sparta, whose beauty was said to rival the dawn. Paris pondered, deeply caught between ambition, wisdom, and passion. The allure of power and glory tempted him, yet it was the promise of love and desire that stirred something deep within. With a breath heavy with destiny, he awarded the golden apple to Aphrodite, choosing love over power and wisdom. His decision, though personal, would ripple through the realms of gods and men alike. This simple act, the giving of a golden apple, ignited the flame that would lead to the Trojan War, a conflict that would last 10 years and change the world forever. Helen, often called the face that launched 1,000 ships, was taken from her husband Menelaus, king of Sparta. Her abduction, or some say elopement by Paris, was seen as a grave insult and a breach of sacred hospitality, sparking fury among the Greek kings. The call to arms was sounded, and the mightiest warriors of Greece gathered to reclaim Helen and defend their honor. Agamemnon, king of Mycenae and brother of Menelaus, led this vast coalition, summoning heroes from far and wide. Among them were Achilles, swift and fierce, nearly invincible in battle; Odysseus, clever and cunning, whose mind was as sharp as any sword; Ajax, towering and strong, a bulwark on the battlefield; and many more whose names would become immortal. But before the war, drums could roll and arrows could fly. The gods watched with vested interest. Each deity chose sides, their divine passions echoing mortal emotions. Hera and Athena, slighted by Paris's judgment, lent their favor to the Greeks, while Aphrodite stood with Paris and the Trojans, protecting her chosen prince. The stage was set, the players assembled. From a single, shimmering apple thrown by the goddess of discord, the tapestry of legend began to weave. The judgment of Paris was not just a tale of beauty and choice, but the quiet beginning of a story filled with heroism, heartbreak, betrayal, and destiny. As the golden apple found its new owner in Aphrodite, and Paris's choice echoed across realms, the consequences began to unfold like ripples on a still lake. The threads of fate were pulling tighter, weaving a story that would soon embroil gods and mortals alike in a struggle of epic proportions. Paris, feeling both exhilarated and burdened by his decision, returned to Troy, the city of his birth. The air around the ancient walls shimmered with anticipation, but also with unease. Though he had won the favor of Aphrodite, the hearts of men and gods were rarely so easily swayed. The promise of love had brought him Helen, but it also brought a storm gathering on the horizon. Helen, queen of Sparta and renowned across the known world for her breathtaking beauty, was unlike any other woman. Her hair cascaded like strands of molten gold, and her eyes held the shimmering depths of distant seas. Her presence could silence a room and inspire both devotion and despair. But Helen's heart was not hers alone. She was bound by marriage to Menelaus, a king both brave and proud, whose honor was as unyielding as the mountains. When Paris arrived on Sparta's shores, escorted by the goddess herself, the delicate balance of power shattered. The moment Helen set eyes on Paris, a spark ignited, whether born of Aphrodite's enchantment or a genuine connection lost to time. None could say. Yet the consequences were immediate. Helen chose to leave with Paris, abandoning her husband and her kingdom, a decision that would echo through legend and history. Back in Sparta, the halls once filled with laughter fell silent. Menelaus, stung by betrayal and fueled by anger, called upon his allies. The oath sworn long ago by Helen's many suitors now came into force. All would unite to defend her honor and reclaim her from Troy. This was not merely a fight over one woman, it was a war for pride, power, and the sacred laws of hospitality and loyalty. News of Helen's departure spread swiftly across the Greek world, carried on the swift wings of ravens, and whispered in the halls of kings. One by one, the great leaders answered the call. Agamemnon, king of Mycenae and brother to Menelaus, took command, gathering a formidable army that would come to be known as the Achaean forces. The Greek camp soon teemed with heroes, each with their own reasons for joining the cause. Achilles, the mightiest warrior among mortals, was summoned from his mother's attempt to hide him away, disguised as a woman in the court of King Lycomedes. His rage and skill promised devastation to Troy's defenders. Odysseus, wise beyond measure and skilled in cunning stratagems, joined with plans as sharp as any blade. Ajax, towering and fearless, vowed to shield his comrades with unbreakable strength, and many others answered the call, from great kings to humble soldiers, each carrying their hopes, fears, and dreams into the impending war. But this was no ordinary conflict. It was a battleground where gods themselves clashed with the might of their immortal wills. The Olympians, ever entangled in human affairs, chose sides with fierce loyalty and personal vendettas. Hera, insulted by Paris's slight, championed the Greek cause with relentless zeal. Athena, embodying wisdom and war strategy, lent her favor to the Greeks, inspiring their tactics and courage. Aphrodite, protector of love and desire, stood firmly with Paris and the Trojans, weaving her subtle influences to shield them from harm. Mount Olympus became a theater of divine intrigue. Zeus, the king of the gods, maintained a cautious neutrality, unwilling to tip the scales too far and provoke the downfall of the entire cosmos. Yet, even he could not remain untouched by the passions below. The thunder in his hands seemed to echo the growing storm of war that threatened to tear worlds apart. Within the city walls of Troy, King Priam and Queen Hecuba faced a mounting crisis. Their son, Paris, once a prince of promise, had become the cause of impending doom. Priam, wise but weary, sought to counsel peace, while Hecuba's heart trembled with fear for the future of their city and family. The great stone gates of Troy, proud and ancient, would soon be tested as never before. As the Greek ships gathered in the harbor of Olympus, the air was thick with tension and anticipation. The assembled fleet numbered over 1,000 vessels, their sails billowing like clouds, their oars dipping in unison. Each ship carried warriors armed for glory and death, ready to sail across the Aegean Sea to a fate none could fully foresee. Yet, even as preparations were underway, the war's first trials began not only in battle, but in the hearts and minds of those involved. The gods' meddling sowed discord, testing loyalty and resolve. Prophecies whispered of long years of siege, of heroes fallen and cities razed. The judgment of Paris, born from a simple golden apple, had set in motion a tale of love and war that would be sung for millennia. Thus the stage was set. From the quiet moment of choice by a young prince to the roaring assembly of 1,000 ships, the threads of fate pulled taut. The Trojan War was about to begin, saga of gods and men, passion and power, sacrifice and glory, as the great fleet prepared to depart from Aulis. The wind so vital to their voyage fell still. Day after day, the ships sat idle in the harbor, their sails limp, their warriors restless. The sea shimmered with eerie calm, and the air grew thick with anxiety. Something was amiss. The gods were watching, waiting, demanding a price. It was the seer Calchas, gifted with the art of divine insight, who broke the silence. He revealed that Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and guardian of the wild, had been offended. Perhaps it was Agamemnon who had spoken rashly, claiming his skill with a bow rivaled hers, or perhaps it was a past offense yet to be answered. Whatever the reason, Artemis withheld the winds until a sacrifice was made, one that pierced deeper than any blade. The sacrifice demanded was Iphigenia, daughter of Agamemnon. The king was torn. As leader of the Greek host, his duty was to the war, to honor to the thousands who waited on his command. But as a father, he reeled with grief. He summoned Iphigenia under false pretenses, claiming she would be wed to Achilles, the great hero. She arrived bright-eyed, unaware of the fate awaiting her. Some say Achilles raged when he learned of the deceit, threatening to turn against Agamemnon. Others say Iphigenia, realizing the necessity, stepped forward with grace and resolve, offering herself willingly to calm the wrath of the gods. Either way, the altar was drenched in tragedy, and as her life was taken, the wind rose at last. Stirring the sails like a sigh of sorrow, the fleet launched into the open sea, a vast armada slicing through the waves toward Troy. Days turned to weeks, and at last the walls of the great city loomed before them, tall and gleaming in the sun. Troy, ancient and proud, stood as a bastion of beauty and strength. Its people had lived in peace for generations, ruled by King Priam with wisdom, and by Queen Hecuba with compassion. But war had come to their shores, brought by a choice made high on Mount Ida, and sealed with the goddess's promise. The Greeks beached their ships on the Trojan shore and began to fortify their encampment. The initial clashes were fierce, as warriors tested each other's strength, and the gods observed with eager eyes. Paris, emboldened by Aphrodite's love, offered to fight Menelaus in single combat, believing he could end the war before it truly began. The armies formed a ring around the dueling princes, spears grounded and eyes fixed. Menelaus, fierce with fury, struck hard and fast, driving Paris to his knees. The fight should have ended there. But just as Menelaus moved in for the kill, a cloud descended upon the battlefield. Paris vanished, spirited away by Aphrodite to the safety of his chambers. Cries of outrage echoed from the Greek ranks. There would be no peace. The war resumed. With full force, each day brought new battles, and with each clash, heroes rose and fell. Diomedes fought with divine strength, even wounding Aphrodite herself. Ajax, son of Telamon, stood like a wall, unyielding against wave after wave of Trojan might. Nestor, the wise king of Pylos, counseled strategy with the experience of years. And then there was Hector noble, Hector prince of Troy, and the city's greatest defender. Where Paris was charming and impulsive, Hector was steadfast and brave. He bore the hopes of his people on his shoulders, and met the Greeks with unmatched valor. His love for Troy, for his wife Andromache, and for their son Astyanax, burned like a sacred flame. He fought not for glory, but for home. The gods, ever meddlesome, began to tip the scales. Athena whispered strategies into the ears of the Greeks. While Apollo strengthened the arms of Trojan warriors, Zeus watched from above, torn by love for his son Sarpedon, and by his promise of neutrality. The war, already fated, began to unravel destinies. Night brought no rest, only uneasy dreams. In the Greek camp, divisions simmered. Agamemnon and Achilles, the army's greatest warrior, quarreled over honor and pride. When Agamemnon seized Briseis, a woman given to Achilles, the hero withdrew from the battle. The tide turned in Troy's favor. Without Achilles, the Greeks faltered. Hector pushed the lions back to the very edge of their ships, nearly setting them aflame. The gods watched closely now, each move on the battlefield a reflection of their own rivalries. The war was no longer just about Helen or even honor. It had become a symbol of divine will and mortal courage. And in the shadows of the citadel, Cassandra, daughter of Priam, uttered prophecies no one believed. She saw the fire, she saw the fall, but her voice, cursed by Apollo to speak true yet be dismissed, fell like leaves on a deaf wind as the war dragged on. Heroes were forged and legends carved into the fabric of time. Yet all knew the war had not truly begun until Achilles returned to the field. But that tale of wrath, of grief, and of vengeance belonged to the days yet to come. The Greek camp stood heavy with silence. No songs of victory echoed across the plain. Only the crackle of distant torches and the weary sounds of sharpening blades marked the hours. The war, once driven by honor and revenge, had ground into something colder, something that weighed. Upon the hearts of even the fiercest warriors, Achilles, the mightiest of the Greeks, remained withdrawn. In his tent by the shore, he sat beside the sea, staring into the restless waves. The quarrel with Agamemnon still burned in his chest, fire kindled not only by insult, but by a deeper wound, a questioning of worth and purpose. Around him the Myrmidons waited, loyal and watchful, their arms ready but their leader unmoved. The war pressed on without him, and Troy surged forward. Hector, emboldened by the absence of his greatest foe, led charge after charge. The Trojans breached the Greek walls, setting fire to the ship's lifelines for the returning warriors. Panic threatened to take root. Hope flickered like a dying flame. It was then that Patroclus, closest companion to Achilles, came to him not as a warrior seeking orders, but as a brother speaking from the heart. "Let me fight, Patroclus," said eyes bright with purpose. "Let me wear your armor. If they think Achilles has returned, the Greeks will rally, and the Trojans will fear us." Achilles looked into his friend's face and saw the same light he once carried, the love of battle, the loyalty to cause, the desire to protect. And though he hesitated, his heart could not refuse. He handed over his armor, kissed his friend's brow, and prayed to the gods for his safe return. Patroclus took to the field like a flame reborn. Clad in Achilles' shining bronze, he led the Myrmidons in a thunderous charge. The Greeks rallied, their spirits reignited. Even the gods paused in their games to watch. For a time, victory seemed near. Patroclus drove the Trojans back to their gates, slaying warrior after warrior. But fate, unyielding and cruel, waited at the edge of glory. Apollo, ever watchful of Troy, struck Patroclus from behind. Dazed, the warrior stumbled. Hector saw his chance and struck the final blow, not knowing the true identity of the man behind the famous armor. When the dust settled and the body was claimed, the truth shattered the hearts of the Greeks and Achilles. Most of all, grief gripped him like a tempest. He tore his clothes, smeared ash upon his face, and cried out to Thetis, his divine mother, "Arm me," he begged. "Let me face them not as a king or a hero, but as vengeance itself." Thetis rose from the depths and went to Hephaestus, the god smith. She asked for new armor forged from fire and star metal, a gift worthy of her son. The armor that returned gleamed with the light of the cosmos, and the shield bore the whole world upon its seas, cities, stars, and silence. Achilles returned to war, but not as the man he had been. His rage was holy. His grief made him godlike. He cut through the battlefield like a storm given form. No wall could stop him, no warrior withstand him. Last, he came face to face with Hector. The prince of Troy stood tall, though he knew the end approached. They circled one another before the walls, while Priam and Hecuba watched from above, their hearts knotted with dread. Achilles struck. The duel was fierce and swift. Hector fell, noble to the end. But Achilles, lost in fury, defiled the body, dragging it behind his chariot around the walls of Troy. The act sent a shudder through gods and men alike. It was no longer justice, it was sorrow twisted into wrath. That night, as Achilles brooded, an old man came into the Greek camp. Priam, king of Troy, risked everything to beg for the return of his son's body. He knelt before Achilles and kissed the hands that had killed his child, and something in Achilles broke. He wept not only for Patroclus or Hector, but for himself, for the cost of pride, for the terrible burden of war. He returned the body, and for a time there was peace. Hector was mourned. Fires burned on the Trojan hills. The gods grew quiet, but the war was not over. Soon would come the death of Achilles, the fall of Paris, the deception of the wooden horse, the burning of Troy. But in that moment, under a weeping sky, the two kings' mortal enemies sat together in grief. And in their silence, the gods listened. The winds had changed. After years of bloodshed, the Greeks still stood at Troy's gates. And yet, the end finally stirred on the horizon like a shadow forming behind a curtain before the storm strikes. With Hector gone and Troy mourning, the balance of power shifted. But the gods were not yet done, nor were the threads of fate fully woven. Paris, the prince whose choice had sparked the flame of war, now wandered through guilt and grief. His bow had grown cold in his hands, and his name once sung in love was now cursed even among his own people. And yet, fate, relentless as it was subtle, guided his hand one last time. It was said that Achilles was invulnerable, bathed in the waters of the river Styx, save for one small place where his mother's fingers had held him. His heel, that tiny mortal flaw, remained hidden from all but the gods. And so, with Apollo guiding his aim, Paris loosed an arrow across the field. The shaft flew true, like destiny itself, and struck Achilles in the heel. The warrior fell immortal in strength, but mortal in blood. His cry rang across the plains. The Greeks wept, and even the earth seemed to still. Thus ended the life of Achilles, the greatest of heroes. With his death, despair threatened to consume the Greeks, but Odysseus, ever clever, ever steadfast, stepped forward. He proposed a plan, one born not from muscle or valor, but from the quiet fire of cunning. They would build a gift, a massive wooden horse, hollowed from timber, beautiful in craftsmanship, and left at Troy's gates. The Greeks, he said, would pretend to retreat, sailing away into the distance. The horse would be an offering, a token of surrender, a gift to Athena, and so it was made at night. Odysseus, Menelaus, and a band of warriors climbed inside its belly. The rest of the army boarded ships and vanished over the horizon, leaving only smoke and the still silence of abandonment. When the Trojans awoke and found the horse, their reaction was divided. Some, like Laocoon, a priest, warned against accepting such a gift. "Beware, Greeks bearing gifts," he cried. But before his voice could sway the people, two great sea serpents rose from the waves sent by the god Sand, devoured him and his sons. The Trojans, terrified, saw this as a sign. With cheers and song, they dragged the horse inside the city walls. That night, as Troy celebrated what they believed was the end of their long siege, the horse stood silent in the square. Music echoed in the streets, fires burned high, wine flowed like rivers. The stars wheeled overhead. Then, under the cloak of midnight, the hidden warriors emerged. They opened the gates of the city to the returning Greek army, who had crept back under cover of darkness. And Troy, proud Troy, fell. The fires consumed palaces and temples. Warriors stormed the streets. Families were torn apart. Priam was slain before his altar. And in the ashes of the city, 1,000 years of legend were born. But even in destruction, love endured. Aeneas, a prince of Troy and a son of Venus, carried his father on his shoulders and led a band of survivors into the night. From him, it was said, a new world would rise. The gods watched, silent at last. Paris was gone. Achilles gone, Helen reclaimed, and the dust of Troy drifted into the sea like a memory. Tale 8. The Odyssean, the smouldering ruins of Troy. Beneath skies choked with the black breath of war, Odysseus stood upon the scorched stones and dreamed of home. 10 years of battle had left his sword dull and his heart weary. The war was over. Troy had fallen. The wooden horse, his own cunning invention, had brought victory at last to the Greeks. Yet, even as his comrades roared in triumph and flames consumed the city behind him, Odysseus felt only a hollow ache. He had seen too much. Death betrayed too many hopes. It was time to return, to Ithaca, to Penelope, who waited with a loom and a kingdom fraying under the weight of years, to Telemachus. The son he barely knew, so he gathered his men-loyal warriors, who had followed him through fire and darkness and boarded their ships, sails snapping like thunder as they turned from Troy's ashes toward the promise of home. But the gods were not finished with Odysseus. Poseidon, Earthshaker, the god of the sea, brooded with ancient wrath. Odysseus had blinded his son, the Cyclops. Polyphemus, and though the hero had acted in defense, the insult could not be forgiven. And so, as the Greek ships carved paths through wind-dark waters, Poseidon stirred the depths. Their first trial came with the winds themselves. At the island of Aeolus, the keeper of the winds, they were received with feasts and songs. Aeolus, moved by Odysseus's tale, gifted him a leather bag that held every wind but the west. As long as Odysseus held it tight, the ship would sail straight to Ithaca. But greed is a subtle poison. As Odysseus slept, dreaming of Penelope, arms, his men, thinking the bag filled with treasure, slit it open. The winds screamed free. The ship spun like a leaf in a storm, flung far from Ithaca's shore. When Odysseus awoke, he found the land he longed for vanished like mist, and Aeolus, angered by their folly, turned them away. They sailed on to the land of the Lastrygonians giants, who crushed men like insects and drank their blood. Only Odysseus's ship escaped, the others dragged down by boulders hurled from the cliffs. Then to Aya, home of Circe, the enchantress with hair like flame and eyes like secrets. She turned his men into pigs with a wave of her hand, but Odysseus, armed with a charm from Hermes, resisted her magic. He confronted her with wisdom and steel, and Circe, astonished, returned his men to their forms. She took him into her bed and into her confidence. For a year they stayed on Ia, drinking wine, licking wounds, growing soft, but Odysseus could not forget Ithaca. With Circe's guidance, he sailed to the edge of the world to seek the counsel of the dead in the underworld. Among shades that whispered of glory and doom, he found the soul of Tiresias, the blind seer. From him, Odysseus learned the path home, but also the trials that lay ahead. You must resist temptation, Tiresias warned, and when you return, blood will be spilled before peace can bloom. They returned to the world of light, wind filling their sails once more. They passed the siren screeches, whose voices dripped honey and despair. Odysseus, curious and cautious, ordered his men to plug their ears with wax, and had himself bound. To the mast, as they passed, he heard their song of promise, of forgotten truths, of ease, of all the answers men seek in dreams. He wept with longing, but could not break free. Past the sirens lay Scylla and Charybdis, the twin terrors, 1A. Many-headed monster who snatched sailors from decks and devoured them alive, the other a whirlpool that swallowed ships whole. Odysseus chose the lesser evil, sailing closer to Scylla. 6 of his men died screaming. He did not look back. Then came the island of Thrinacia, sacred to Helios, god of the sun. There fat cattle roamed the fields, the vine beasts forbidden to mortals. Odysseus warned his men, but famine and temptation conspired. They slaughtered the sacred cows. Helios, enraged, demanded vengeance. Zeus obliged. A lightning bolt split Odysseus's ship, sending it to the depths. Only Odysseus survived, clinging to a shard of wood, drifting for days. At last, the waves delivered him to Ogygia, the island of Calypso. The nymph took him in, fed him, healed him. She fell in love, offered him immortality. Stay with me, she begged. Forget your pain. Be a god. Odysseus wept each morning on the shore. 7 years passed. Then Hermes arrived, bearing Zeus's command. Calypso, grieving, let him go. She gave him tools, helped him build a raft, and watched as he disappeared beyond the horizon. Poseidon, still watching, raised a storm. The raft shattered. But Odysseus reached the land of the Phaeacians, where kind Nausicaa found him, naked and half-mad. Among the reeds she brought him to her father, King Alcinous, who welcomed the stranger with honor. There Odysseus told his story, the whole long, aching tale. The Phaeacians, moved, gave him gifts and a ship. At last, Ithaca. But home was not home. Suitors filled his hall, greedy men devouring his wealth, seeking Penelope's hand. She had waited, weaving by day and unraveling by night. Holding them at bay with wit and hope, Odysseus returned in secret, disguised as a beggar. He tested his servants, reunited with his son in shadows, and planned his revenge. Penelope, wise and weary, declared a contest. Whoever could string Odysseus's great bow and shoot it through 12 axe heads would win her hand. One by one, the suitors failed. Then the beggar took the bow. With a smooth motion, he strung it. The string sang, the arrow flew true, and then Odysseus revealed himself. and blood filled the hall. Suitors fell, struck by arrows and swords, their arrogance answered by justice. When it was done, Odysseus stood among the dead, silent. Penelope did not run to him, she tested him, asking of their bed how it was made. Only he knew it was carved from a living tree. She wept, he embraced her. Odysseus, at last, was home. But peace, like the sea, is never still. The families of the slain suitors demanded justice. Odysseus would have fought again, but Athena intervened. With words and will, she forged a fragile peace. Thus ended the Odyssey not with war, but with wisdom. Odysseus, scarred and wiser, ruled again, and the bards sang of his journey, not just of monsters and storms, but of the heart that endures, the love that waits, and the home worth every trial. Tale 9. Medusian, the shadowed reaches of ancient Greece, where myths breathe like the wind through olive trees, there lived a woman named Medusa. She was once radiant, a maiden of unsurpassed beauty, with hair like spun gold and eyes that gleamed. With gentle light, born mortal but graced by the gods' favor, she dwelled in a temple sacred to Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. Medusa was a priestess there, sworn to a life of purity and service. Her beauty was a blessing and a curse. Men whispered of her in hushed tones, traveling far and wide just to catch a glimpse. They spoke of her shining hair that shimmered in the sunlight, of a smile that could warm the coldest winter, and of eyes that seemed to hold the calm depth of the sea. Yet it was not desire that would seal her fate, but the envy and cruelty of the divine. One day, Poseidon, god of the sea and storms, cast his covetous gaze upon Medusa. His desire was fierce and untamed. He pursued her relentlessly, and the sacred temple became the stage of his unyielding passion. Despite her prayers to Athena and her desperate pleas, Poseidon claimed her within those holy walls, desecrating the place of worship and shattering the sanctity Medusa held dear. When Athena learned of this sacrilege, she did not turn her wrath upon Poseidon, the mighty god whose storms ruled the seas. Instead, her anger fell upon Medusa, the innocent victim. It was a punishment born of divine jealousy and twisted justice. Athena transformed Medusa's beauty into horror. Her golden locks became a writhing mass of serpents, each scale shimmering with venom and malice. Her eyes, once gentle and full of light, now held a deadly power to turn any who met her gaze into cold. Lifeless stone, Medusa was cast out, condemned to wander the desolate edges of the world, a creature of nightmare and legend. Her sorrow was as deep as the oceans. The maiden who had known only light was now a shadow, feared and hunted by all. Her name became a whisper of terror, a warning told by mothers to keep children close. Yet within her monstrous form beat the heart of a woman betrayed, filled with grief and rage. She hid in caves and ruined temples, shunned by gods and men alike, living on the fringes of the world. Her serpents hissed like whispers of vengeance, her gaze a silent scream against the cruelty that had stripped her of everything. But even in exile, Medusa's story was not one of simple darkness. Her power was immense and terrifying, yes, but it was also a force of protection. Travelers who dared enter her domain with evil intent were turned to stone, their arrogance frozen forever. she became a guardian of the forgotten places, a fierce sentinel between the mortal world and the divine dot. It was Perseus, a young hero sent on a seemingly impossible quest, who would cross paths with Medusa, armed with gifts from the gods: a polished bronze shield from Athena, a gleaming sword from Hephaestus, and winged sandals from Hermes. Perseus ventured into her lair. He approached with a heart pounding between fear and resolve. With Athena's guidance, Perseus used the shield as a mirror, avoiding Medusa's petrifying gaze by watching her reflection. The serpents writhed and hissed, sensing danger. The air crackled with tension as the hero closed in. Then, with a swift, silent strike, Perseus severed Medusa's head. From her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a giant wielding a golden sword, gifts born of her divine lineage. Perseus wrapped her head carefully, knowing its terrible power could still turn any onlooker to stone. Medusa's death was tragic, but her legacy lived on, a symbol of beauty transformed by cruelty, of strength born from suffering. Her head became a protective emblem placed on shields and armor to ward off evil. And sometimes, when the wind whispers through the ancient ruins where she once roamed, one can hear the soft hiss of serpents and the echo of a soul that, despite all, refused to be silenced. Thank you so much for joining me on this 2-hour voyage through the timeless world of Greek mythology. From the very birth of the gods through the mighty labors of Hercules, the epic battles of the Titanomachy, the haunting tale of Persephone's descent, the fiery gift of Prometheus, the tragedy of the Trojan War, the daring flight of Icarus, the long journey of Odysseus, and the chilling story of Medusa together. We've traveled across realms of wonder, bravery, love, and transformation. I hope these stories have brought you a sense of calm, wonder, and maybe even a little inspiration as you prepare to drift off to sleep. Greek myths have a way of whispering ancient truths and dreams, gently guiding us through darkness and light. May these tales stay with you softly through the night, comforting your mind and carrying you into restful dreams. Thank you for listening so patiently and for letting these legends be part of your evening. Rest well, and may your own story be filled with courage and hope. Until next time, sleep peacefully, and remember, every ending is just the beginning of a new adventure.